Retro-inspired 2D platformers. There's a lot of those. Yeah, that's a thing that's been said a lot by a lot of people, including me, so yeah, that means I'm officially running out of ideas. Shit. When you think about it, the sheer amount of these games isn't really a strange thing considering how broad of a term 2D platformer actually is. I mean, yeah, you do basically the same thing, you move left and right and jump on platforms, hence the name platformer, shoutouts to Bubsy, but there are a lot of ways you can actually do that, and it often depends on what classic title the game took inspiration from. Super Mario Bros., Mega Man, and Castlevania are all platformers, but they're very different types of games. Based on that premise alone, it's no wonder there's so many of these platformers. A lot of good ones too. 2014 was a great year for these games. Shantae and the Pirate's Curse is a game I talked about at length. Shovel Knight might be one of the best games in the entire genre. Gunvolt is... yeah, Gunvolt. I can't remember anything about that game. One of my friends is playing it, she's enjoying it, so I might come back to it, but yeah. 20XX looks amazing from what I've seen. But as you might suspect, I'm not here to talk about those games today. Today I'm talking about Galaxy Trail's own Freedom Planet. That's all... don't look at me, I don't know how to start videos. Freedom Planet is a game that emulates the style of Genesis and Saturn games really, really well. You can probably already tell which games I'm talking about at this point. This game is based on Sonic the Hedgehog, but also lots of other games. But seeing how the only Genesis game I played besides Sonic is Castlevania Bloodlines, which is nothing like Freedom Planet, I'll just stick with the Sonic comparisons. But the thing with indie games that are heavily inspired by a certain classic is that there's always a drive to be just different enough from the source material. But before I elaborate on that, let me go into the story because I always do that first. The story of Freedom Planet starts with a cutscene of a palace being invaded by an alien commander, who seems to be doing a very good job. Not only does he brutally murder an entire platoon of soldiers off camera, he straight up beheads this emperor on camera. Actually, can you even call it a beheading if the head's just gone? Like, jeez. Also, the planet's name isn't actually Freedom. Yeah, I know. Or Mobius, for that matter, it's called Avalis. However, when the name of the game is Freedom Planet, you can probably guess what kind of setting Avalis is. That's right, China. Anyway, after the successful alien insurrection and supposed brainwashing, we get a bunch of text explaining that tensions are high in China Planet. There's 3 kingdoms, I'm just gonna call them red, green, and blue. Like every setting with furries in it, the power source is rocks. However, said rocks are running out of power and the furries want more, so naturally, all hell breaks loose. What follows is a tale of intrigue, alliances, war. And to be completely honest, I don't really care that much about it. Now don't get me wrong, I do like some aspects of the story. First of all, the characters are all pretty nice and well designed, more on that later. The Chinese aesthetic is pleasing and I like how it tries? Thing is, I feel like at times it tries to do too much at the same time. At one moment it throws all these fun, goofy visual gags at you, and then next this guy's all like, I've lost everything in the Space Wars. There's also a lot of characters that don't have any room to get fleshed out, like Spade for example, which is ironic considering the length of this game's cutscenes. Sometimes there's up to 8 minutes worth of cutscene in between stages, which is long for a platformer, and there's no auto advance on the dialogue, which makes these cutscenes feel even longer. The story isn't bad per se, but I just don't think it had to be this grand. All it had to be was the story of Lilac, Carol, and Mila, those are the main characters, I forgot to mention that, on their quest to save Avalis from Lord Brevin. Nothing more, nothing less. And somehow I believe that halfway through development, the folks over at Galaxy Trail realized that as well, as this game has not one, but 2 cutscene skip options. One to skip the current cutscene and another to skip everything and just go to the next stage. There's even a game mode in which there are simply no cutscenes at all. Because, fuck it. I mean, story in video games, am I right? Who cares? This is a joke, I love video games with good stories. Some of my favorite games are my favorites because of their story, characters, lore, etc. Honestly, if my school career is anything to go by, I don't even know how to read. Or listen, for that matter. Communication is very hard for me. Anyway, now that I got all my minor, albeit long-winding complaints out of the way, I can gush for the rest of this video because this game is fucking great. Freedom Planet is structured as a linear, level-based adventure with usually 2 acts per level and a boss at the end of each act, like that other game. And before we get into gameplay itself, can we just talk for a second about how beautiful all these levels are? Like, all of them? Well, yeah, we can. This is my show. I make the decisions. Anyway, each level is very unique and captivating in its own way. I also like how within a lot of them is a transition from one theme to another. For example, Dragon Valley starts off in a rocky, canyon-like environment, but gradually becomes more filled with plants and water. Relic Maze begins in some ruins within a forest, but then switches to a crystal cave theme in the second act. Jade Creek takes you through a bamboo forest in the first act, but has you running on a huge submarine in the second act, and on top of that, the entire level is a cop chase, so that's fucking radical. Screw it, put on the Beverly Hills Cop theme. That's not the version I had in mind. It also helps that this game's art looks beautiful. It really brings out all of the stage's unique themes, my favorite being, Jade Creek probably. The backgrounds and tile sets are all very nice to look at, even when you're speeding through these levels, which is impressive considering that technically, this game only has a resolution of 426 by 240. And it's not just the backgrounds and tiles that are beautiful, there's this huge overall attention to detail in character sprites, so many extra frames of animation that most other indie studios would skip out on. For example, this special animation for when a character grabs onto a ladder while having a lot of horizontal speed, the way all the characters spin around after being launched upwards, or the face that Carol makes when she's holding herself up along with her bike. Look at her, that's not the face of a happy cat. The characters themselves are also very well designed. The playable characters are nice and diverse, and I feel like their appearances represent their style of gameplay very well, which we'll get to in a second. Other non-playable characters like Nira, Spade, and Serpentine also look cool. The only design I can't really get behind completely is Torque. He just looks kind of weird, which I suppose makes sense considering he's an alien, but aside from that, the character designs are all completely bang up the elephant. Yeah, that's Victorian slang, I'm using that from now on. No, I'm not. What I'm trying to say is the character designs are great. Anyway, to complete the presentation package, the soundtrack is, as you would expect from the kind of games I cover, once again, amazing. The way I describe it is classic Sonic, but without most of the funk. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, hey, that's awful, the funk is one of the best things about classic Sonic music, but in Freedom Planet's case, it does its own thing, and it does it really well, with some catchy beats that fit the areas they play in perfectly, and get you pumped to keep playing this game. It actually kind of reminds me of Sonic Advance's soundtrack now that I think about it, so it is more like Sonic. Oops. Now let's finally get into gameplay. I can say with full honesty that this is one of the best retro platformers I've ever played. It feels good to play this game. There's this sense of speed that's just exhilarating to experience and all the more rewarding if you manage to keep it going. What greatly helps the speed is that enemies don't hurt you on contact, they need to actively attack you to deal damage. Speaking of damage, the combat in this game is also just top-notch. Much like the speed, it's just so much fun to dish out the pain and to kill. The two biggest factors in that are the sound design and the fact that lots of enemies don't have invincibility frames, which leads to just beautiful moments like these. But you don't have those invincibility frames either, so it can also happen to you. It's give and take, I guess. The combination of speed and combat really lets the playable characters shine, as the focus of each character is in different places. Let me go over all those playable characters. First you got Lilac the Dragon. She's supposed to be the speed character, which can be concluded from her higher top speed compared to the other two characters, and her Dragon Boost, which lets her rev up and shoot away horizontally or diagonally. This can be used as a way to quickly pick up speed in case you've slowed down a bit, or to launch into enemies and sometimes score multiple powerful hits. She also has a damage-dealing double jump, a dive kick, and a shoryuken, although I barely ever use the last two, just the double jump. Next up is Carol the Wildcat. She's a bit slower than Lilac, but she makes up for it when it comes to combat. Aside from her basic attacks, she's got flurry kicks and these so-called wild claw attacks that replace your regular attacks when pouncing or rolling. Both of these attacks deal big damage when done right, and the wild claw is especially satisfying to pull off. She also has a bike power-up, which gives her a little extra speed and a double jump, which sort of turns her into a Carol-Lilac hybrid when you think about it. And lastly, we have Mila. Mila is a bit weird. She has a lot less health than the likes of Carol and Lilac, and her playstyle is more focused on defending rather than avoiding. She has this shield which can point in multiple directions, and when you let go of the button, she'll fire a short-range blast that damages enemies. She can also form this cube, which she can either throw at enemies or use it to power up her shield, and with that, her shield attack. Her playstyle is very different from the other two, and I'm sure you're able to do lots of interesting things with her, but she's honestly my least favorite of the three. I am too dumb to play her. Also, fun fact, Freedom Planet actually started out as a Sonic fan game, but it was changed to an original game halfway through development, and I think it's very interesting to see when that change happened and what carried over from it. There's obvious things like the level design, but also the names of the levels themselves. Just slap the word zone at the end and bam, you get a Sonic level. Also the character designs, and archetypes if that's the word for it. You got three main characters, one's focus is speed, the other is combat and climbing, and the last is flight. Kind of. That's pretty much Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles if you think about it. I don't know, it's just really fun to me to try and see what used to be Sonic and what's completely new. Anyway, back to that combination of speed and combat. I call it a combination, but it's not really that. It's more that they follow each other up. The stages are all about going fast. You rush through them as quickly as you can and you do all sorts of frickin' tubular shit as you go. The enemies serve solely as obstacles, a way to halt your going fastness. Speed is the word I'm looking for. God damn it. The enemies aren't really the focus, which is helped by the fact that, once again, they need to actually attack you in order to even succeed as an obstacle, and some of them don't even get the chance to do that. The real obstacles, the places where this game's combat truly gets to shine, are the bosses. There's usually a boss at the end of each act, and sometimes a mini-boss in the middle of the acts. These bosses are the real tests of your combat skills. In order to maximize your damage output and minimize theirs, you'll have to memorize each pattern, learn when to strike, how to not get struck yourself, or in some cases, learn how to just cheese the ever-loving hell out of these fights. Looking at you, Spade, why aren't you playable? If you do not learn any of these things, your ass is grass and this game will mow it. This game can get pretty hard at times, especially on the higher difficulties, and it's not just the bosses that bring this difficulty, some of the later stages can get pretty tough if you're not careful. It really catches up to you, or at least it caught up to me. In the first few stages I was able to be carefree. I pretty much got used to rushing through them, which ended up burning me in the later stages. And that's a good thing. I think a good game gets harder as it goes on. I especially like it when it happens exponentially, or parabolic, I don't know, like an actual difficulty curve is what I'm saying. And I think Freedom Planet nails that curve. It starts you off nice and comfy and actually stays like that for a while with some bumps here and there, but then revs up the engines and lets you know that it's not playing around anymore. However, I never felt that it got too difficult. A lot of bosses seem very intimidating at first, especially when they get that slowdown when they first appear, or whenever they land in this battleship's case. But once you figure them out, they're all doable, and when that slowdown returns upon delivering the final blow, that's satisfaction in its purest form. The whole game is satisfaction. To repeat myself, it feels good to play this game. The speed, the combat, the style, everything is there, and it makes the whole package feel amazing.
It's got good game feel!
Yeah, the story isn't much to write home about. Yeah, lives are completely useless as you start at the last checkpoint even when you get a game over. And yeah, there are some features that I don't think were properly implemented yet, like what do these chests even do? But those are just nitpicks to an otherwise perfect game. A perfect game which I feel people don't talk about enough, which is a shame because this game deserves attention. If you love retro platformers, particularly those on the Genesis or Mega Drive if you're European, you need to check out Freedom Planet, and then the Freedom Planet 2 demo. That one's also great. Also, I've been doing this for like a year now. That's cool.